Good morning to everyone. It's still morning. I'm really delighted to chair this session, an opening session, a roundtable debate on heritage and innovation. The main aim of this opening session is basically to investigate a variety of links between heritage and innovation. And I think that this kind of relationship appears to be more important than ever, given the fact that over the last, 18 months now, the heritage sector has undergone a major, or a period of a major change, or major changes, really. The kind of period that I think requires new and innovative approaches to pretty much everything we've known about heritage. I'm tempted to say about heritage's old ways. I think we need to learn something about heritage's new ways. And today we are joined, and for this debate, we're joined by notable experts in the field. I will start with John. Hopefully I'm introducing our speakers in an alphabetical order, so I will start with John, who is a Director of Culture and Engagement at the National Trust, UK, responsible for the organization's care and programming of its historic places. John was formerly Director of Museum for Arts Council England and head of London and national programs for the British Museum, where in fact he started his career as a curator of Roman coins. So hopefully John will join us in a second. Second speaker is Maria Jimena Quijano Perdomo, who's a research associate at the University of Leuven. Maria studied architecture in Colombia and Italy and holds a Master of Science in Conservation and Monuments and Sites. Her research focuses on heritage-led rural development and capacity building, particularly in areas of northern Spain, those affected by depopulation. And of course, Maria is part of the Leuven-based ILUCIDARE team. Our third speaker is Gabor Sonkoly, Professor of History and former Dean of the Faculty of Humanities at Eötvös, Loránd University in Budapest. Gabor's list of publication is actually, it's breathtaking and includes monographs, book chapters, articles in international journals. And Gabor's research focuses mostly on urban history, urban heritage, and critical history of cultural heritage. I guess Gabor's best known work is still Historic Urban Landscape, published a couple of years ago. Gabor is a researcher in several EU-funded research projects and the chairman of the panel for European Heritage Label. And he's also, and my French got really rusty, but Gabor is a Chevalier de l'Ordre des Palmes Académiques and Chevalier de l'Ordre National du Mérite. Clara Tis is our fourth speaker. One of the founders of Herbé, a research agency specializing in new destination for complex heritage projects. Clara studied archaeology at the University of Ghent and conservation at the University of Leuven. Clara was a member of the research team in the Cultural Heritage Council for Europe project and has been the director of the Ruben Willert private heritage company based in Bruges. In 2020, Clara co-founded Herbé, where she provides historic buildings with a new life and where her passion for architecture meets the respect for history. And our final speaker is Aziliz Vandesande, who is the scientific coordinator of the ILUCIDARE project. Aziliz is the University of Leuven graduate, where she obtained her degree. Aziliz is doctor in civil engineering with research on preventive conservation for built heritage. Aziliz is a member of the UNESCO Chair on Preventive Conservation, Maintenance and Monitoring of Monuments and Sites, and co-developed risk assessment methodology in collaboration with the UNESCO office in Amman, in Jordan. Apart from coordinating ILUCIDARE, teaching and publishing research results, Aziliz has been involved in several other international research and development projects. And in fact, Aziliz will be our first speaker today. She will present the heritage-led innovation concept, including the idea of the ILUCIDARE Innovation Handbook. Aziliz, over to you.
Thank you very much, Robert. I was just thinking it's great to see you all there present together in Krakow. Yeah, I want to apologize for not being there, but due to the ongoing sanitary conditions, I was not able to travel and meet you all. As Robert already said, my colleague Jimena is present with you throughout the week. So I hope you will, I'm sure you all will be having very fruitful discussions about the topics of innovation and heritage. I wanted to say specifically also hello to some people that I also recognized in the room. I see Clara, very nice to have you there with us after such a time. Yeah, I can actually see you guys. So for me, it's also a very interesting setup. Yeah, I'm kind of like, I feel like a spy in a way. Okay, so thank you, Robert, for this introduction. If it's okay, I will share my screen and give you guys, let's say, a sneak preview of the innovation handbook that we are developing in the project. So as far as I understand, you all have heard already a short introduction to the project. So voila, there we go. This is the right one. I hope you all have my full screen. So you already had a short introduction on what the project is about. So we are a 3-year EU-funded project within the Horizon 2020 framework, so which is the research and innovation framework of the European Union. We at University of Leuven, we are coordinating the project. And when we first saw the call for the project, there were 2 main pillars that we were asked to focus on. One being, let's say, international relations, and the other one, innovation. Hence, we came up with the following catchphrase for our project, being building international connections for heritage-led innovation, which I think resembles quite well the overall, let's say, atmosphere, ambiente in the project. So trying to connect the 3 concepts of how can heritage contribute both to international relations, so better relations between the EU and its third country, to working on heritage preservation or training, as well as the component of heritage-led innovation. So obviously today, I will mainly focus on the second pillar of our project. Given also the title is kind of a giveaway, so heritage and innovation in Central Europe and beyond. So here you can see a sneak preview of what the cover of our innovation handbook will look like. Some of you might recognize the ortho photo of the building on the cover. Maybe something that I want to mention here is that when we say handbook, you can really literally expect a more practical handbook rather than the academic research work that you would usually find coming from our offices. So we really try to create a product, a handbook that is accessible to all. Definitely not only people in the heritage sector, it's really open and available to entrepreneurs over the EU or even beyond. So obviously it's written in English. And we try to create a light and sometimes funny style, but specifically light, because we found that the topic of heritage and innovation is very underappreciated as well as understudied, in the sense that there is literally not even a definition about what heritage and innovation have in common, or let's say basically no research has been done on trying to connect both topics. Maybe before we give a bit of a, let's say, content sneak preview, we wanted to say something about the contributors to this handbook. So the two main authors are myself and again, Jimena, who is there present with you today. But what I would like to stress is that obviously we could not have created something out of the blue, something quite innovative in itself, just by ourselves. Obviously, our partners were a great contribution to this handbook. So by now you should all know who is ICC and what they are doing. But of course, we have a whole bunch of other partners involved as well. One of the largest civil society organizations dealing with heritage in Europe, Orna-Ornstein. We have Lorena in the room I saw before. Then we also have very strong, let's say, a world-leading R&D company, IMEC, who is helping us to define new methods to create innovation roadmaps and co-creation ateliers. And we also have very strong capacity building partners with a long track record in bringing innovation in different parts of the world. But apart from our partners, I really want to stress the group of our practitioners and case studies. For those with a keen eye, you might see that Clara is in our group of practitioners, and she's again also present there today, together with a bunch of entrepreneurs who have kickstarted already heritage innovation projects in Europe. We defined a very practical roadmap for people to use. I will get back to that later on. And we are also very, how to say, cordial about all the heritage-led innovation case studies that we already found in EU, because they were, indispensable in creating this handbook. And then finally, you, the reader, hopefully you will all read it in the very near future. We literally designed this handbook to get input from you and to understand if you have an idea, an innovative idea about innovation and you would like to implement it, we definitely invite you to use the different sections in our handbook that we designed for you to help to make a step-by-step plan to go from your idea to innovation. Looking at the time, I will now go a bit more into the content. So what is this heritage-led innovation all about? Like Robert said, definitely the last 18 months, but maybe even before. It's something heritage has been definitely lagging on the innovation platform, so to say, in Europe and even beyond. We think that one of the things that was definitely not helping us in the heritage sector is that there is no definition or no way to talk about what is this heritage-led innovation. So one of the first things that we developed was our working definition for this. It's basically a culmination of looking into a whole bunch of innovation definitions, trying to distill the core components that are also eligible or that also fit for heritage assets. And the good thing is that we can definitely say that this definition has also been validated at several events by EU and international experts and again, entrepreneurs. So what are we talking about when we say heritage-led innovation? At the very, very core, and this is important in everything that you'll be doing throughout this week and hopefully definitely also beyond, is that the goal of the innovation is to create value or at least preserve the value of what is currently there. So if you're dealing with any heritage asset, object, intangible tradition, always make sure that the value that it has created remains, and hopefully that you can improve the current situation where it's in. How to kickstart such an innovation? Well, new knowledge is always at the basis of an innovation, no matter what. The good thing is this new knowledge usually comes from an intersecting of disciplines or even sectors. And in that sense, we in the heritage sector already have 1 foot ahead in the game because we are at our very core an interdisciplinary sector. Then something very important that's returns throughout almost every chapter in the handbook is an innovation does not equal an innovative idea. It should be tested at least, but preferably implemented before it can actually be called an innovation. And then finally, something that's also, well, let's say key, all the 4 components are key, obviously, is that It's never us, the heritage experts or the heritage-driven persons involved in any innovation project who define the success. It will always be the markets and society obviously also including local communities related to the heritage assets that you're working with. That's quite a broad definition. As soon as we started checking what's already happening in Europe, we mapped some projects. We found that there is 3 main categories of heritage-led innovation. The first one being heritage-driven innovation. These are basically cases, examples where the new idea originated from a need really in the heritage sector, and it is developed by experts in the heritage sector. So we can say that it's really related very closely to our sector. In some cases, we can see that this type of project generates a spillover effect, but those are actually quite limited. These kind of innovations mainly pertain to, let's say, more material innovations like new consolidation materials or chemicals to treat the deterioration of materials. You can see one example here, which is one of our current shortlisted candidates for the ILUCIDARE special prizes. The second category is about assimilation of innovation, and its meaning is kind of in the title is basically us in the heritage sector taking on board existing technologies to improve the preservation or communication about heritage. This can range from everything from 3D laser scanning to new communication materials. And then the final category is heritage as a resource. And there we talk about innovations that come from using the inherent values, be it universal or very local, and based on those generating something new. Here we find a lot of examples that can be linked to the cultural and creative industries. And the example that you will find in our handbook to explain this is TIPA, which is the name for the Estonian Print and Paper Center, who are actually the very first winner of the ILUCIDARE Special Prize in our project. Now, as I mentioned before, so as I was saying before, to generate these, let's say, heritage-led innovation categories, we did a mapping of examples that we found already in the EU. And when I say mapping of examples, I mean example that fits our definition of heritage-led innovation. So we found about 130 cases, which we also analyzed. I'm going to quickly show some data here, but I will definitely try to keep it short and not get you all asleep on the very first day of this summer school. So what we found is that the people who initiate heritage-led innovations are still and usually research and education institutes, be it universities, local schools, research institutes like ICC, whatnot. And that there is only very little involvement from other, let's say, actors. The interesting thing is that when you look at it on the long term, so if the innovation succeeds and it's actually being carried on more sustainably, we see that a lot more civil society organizations and businesses are involved. So for us, this is already a very positive sign, but we do hope to generate an idea that in the future also business and civil society can become the linchpin, the initiators of such innovations. When looking at where these innovations take place, I think it's definitely interesting to mention that most of them we found in cities. It's not so surprising because we do consider cities in our current society as, let's say, a melting place of a lot of different ideas, culture, languages, sciences. So yes, there is a lot of innovation going on. It's quite unfortunate to see that in the more rural areas in Europe, we could find much more little examples. Is it possible that they are more present? Yes, definitely. We're of course confined due to both the pandemic as well as language barriers to do an in-depth mapping. So it's likely that there are more, but still we can with almost exact certainty say that cities are the core of innovation. The part on the right hand, well, for me, the right hand side of the graph, the cross-state collaboration, with this we refer to projects or heritage-led innovation that came into being by collaboration between different countries. These are usually EU-funded projects. Also interesting to mention, because we obviously saw that the program of the summer school is structured according to the different PESTEL categories. Throughout our mapping, we also assigned each heritage-led innovation case one or more of the PESTEL components to understand where these innovations are coming from. Interesting to see for us was that the technical factor of the PESTEL was actually the one who stood out. We were expecting that social-driven heritage-led innovations would be more common. We expect that this is because of the category of assimilation of innovation. Most of the things that we found were indeed related to existing apps communication technologies. Something that we also hope to see changing in the future is we definitely need to increase our work when it comes to ecological driven heritage-led innovation projects, be it linked to biodiversity or other aspects. This is really definitely still too low. Also interesting to mention is that we only saw a very small overlap of these PESTEL categories. So some of them could have been both social and technical, or social, technical and economical. But when it comes to really taking a very integrated point of view of kickstarting such innovations, there were only very little of them who were taking into account 4 or more of the PESTEL components. So I think the message here is for you in the room and everyone basically is, yeah, it's really time to look beyond our old habits, so to say. Don't be afraid to work with unusual suspects and more than one at the same time, preferably. Also interesting to mention is this. So when we look at the, let's say, traditional types of innovation that we find, which are commodities, configuration, and experiences, and seeing how heritage is represented in those, we did find something that we were kind of expecting. Most of the innovation cases are about how to better engage stakeholders through heritage. They can also relate to intangible services, a lot of branding we also saw, which was expected, quite interesting. Something that we hope to see changed in the future as well is definitely related to business models. We do feel that heritage has a lot of potential to play in the market there. Let me just stress, we are not talking about, let's say, branding big companies through heritage. No, really business models that start from the innovation from heritage core values. We have several examples that we will highlight like that in the rest of the innovation handbook. Then the final, let's say, boring data component, I do promise you, is about, when we talk about these heritage-led innovations, do they actually create value or improve the current situation? The answer is yes, because otherwise it would not have been part of the cases that we selected, according to the definition, obviously. Okay, I also hope I'm not going over time. I'm going as quick as I can. It's just I cannot see you guys anymore, or if Robert, if you're waving, I can just not see you. Do these heritage-led innovations that we found create value? Yes, but mainly for the heritage sector itself. What does this mean? They usually end up in better preservation, better management, or better community participation in the local communities. There is some cases where we also found, but then again on a very local scale, an added value that these innovations generated beyond the heritage sector. These were mainly related to what could be expected tourism, but also education. And this was for us already a very interesting component to see. And then finally, looking on the right-hand side about the spillover potential. So there we mean really spillover potential to other sectors on a more wider geographic scale. There we could find that there is only very little spillover, but the ones that we did find were actually kind of cool. We had usual suspects like construction sector, real estate sector, but we also found some very nice examples of spillover to gaming, to biodiversity, and even to the medicine sector. Again, several examples will be highlighted in the final innovation handbook, and during question round, I can obviously get back to them. Next to just the boring data in theory, what will you find in the handbook as well? We showcase a lot of practical case studies with some explanation about it in chapter 2 to show that we all have something in our head about what is innovation, thinking about research and development sector, but we really wanted to showcase what are the specificities of heritage in the innovation landscape today. Next to that, you will also find a bit more strange examples because we also provide some more theoretical background to explain what an innovation process entails. One of the cases that you can find, for instance, is a development from horse-drawn carriages to automobiles. More specifically, you see here the first 4T model that was produced. When looking at, let's say, the background process, so what is this innovation process about? You will see that there is a lot of barriers that you will have to conquer before your idea or your dream will become practically implemented. To illustrate this process and all these barriers that you encounter during your heritage-led innovation adventure, we didn't want to explain them mainly on academic literature or really going in depth on technical concepts. Rather than that, we decided to translate them in a game walkthrough, which we call the quest for innovation. And you can see here the overall quest of innovation, that the little guy on the left-hand side, everything that he has to do to go from his niche in his regime, to gain momentum with people around him, to go beyond the innovation resistance, being the people, we have always done it this way, let's not change what we're doing, how we can harness powers from the landscape to create windows of opportunities to finally have his idea implemented in the ongoing regime. So that's also definitely in the handbook. What I just said before, so all these obstacles and barriers that you have to conquer and the game walkthrough, they are based more on academic literature and a lot of economic research. There's a lot of basically economic literature out there which talks about what are innovations all about. You have economic literature in the tradition of Darwin. There's a lot of social technical transition trajectories. There's a lot going on. But we didn't want to merely stick to the theory. We also wanted to make it very, very practical. And again, this is where the practitioners came in. So in the beginning, I mentioned that we were having several co-creation ateliers with a group of practitioners, including Clara, who is with you today. Our aim was there, if you guys had a dream, because all of them were somehow involved, like Clara, in setting up a new company or doing something really, really fun, crazy and innovative related to heritage. If you first had your idea, how did you actually make it happen? Because it's a big difference than reading about it in an article than actually doing it in day-to-day reality. And through the many discussions that we had, we succeeded in making what we call this innovation roadmap. And we succeeded in distilling 5 main steps that each has to take in the innovation process, being, if you have a dream, you first have to get a lay of the land, understand what's going on. You then will have to make your innovation a party. You will never do it alone. It's always a co-op mission. Then you have to set up camp, make a plan, run some pilot test projects. You have to then act on it, actually make investments, make something happen. And then hopefully, well, really also keep it up. It's not just about doing a one-time project. It's really making sure that your innovation is out there, shared and usable by others. On the bottom part, you can see how the innovation roadmap looks like in the book. Obviously, we don't expect you to be able to read this on the screen. I know Jimena has some printed copies of the innovation roadmap with her, so she can definitely show them if you want. And also Clara, I'm sure she can contribute. Again, this is meant to be super practical. Interesting for you to know is that apart from, let's say, this map with all the bullet points and step-by-step guide on how to get your idea on the road, is that we also made a case study version of the roadmap where we basically highlight through the cases of our practitioners what you can do in certain cases, like how how to make your mock-up business plan, and where to find funding resources that are not just funding from public government. So then we have some examples there as well as for the other bullet points. And good for you to know is that, like in many other chapters, we also gave space in the handbook for you to make your own roadmap. So if you have your dreams, you can basically fill in the bullet points, a first draft, like how am I gonna get this idea on the road? Who is gonna be my team that I'm doing it with? How am I gonna make it a party? And how am I gonna make it sustainable? Jimena also has some of those empty maps with her. So if there is people in the room who are having a super crazy and cool idea about an heritage asset, I would say, just go for it, fill it out, share it with us, and you might just be handpicked to present it during our very next playground. And I think this is where I will stop talking because I've definitely talked too much. So I'm going to also stop sharing my screen. I hope this was a bit useful, and the floor is again all yours, Robert.
Thank you very much, Aziliz. I tried to butt in and stop you a couple of times, but it turned out that once your mic was on, mine was off.
Okay. I'm very sorry for this.
Now both are on, so apparently it is possible. Okay, thanks a lot, Aziliz. I know, I mean, you wanted to be here with us very, very much, and we also wanted you to be here. But I mean, we're delighted that at least we can get together via all those online, devices. I would like to start with a very general question, a question directed to all of you. At the beginning of this session, I mean, the first morning session, I talked briefly about our philosophy, the philosophy behind the ILUCIDARE project, but also the philosophy behind the summer school. And we talked about heritage and innovation being either adversaries or allies. And my first question is about the validity of this claim, that namely the claim that stipulates that heritage and innovation should be considered allies, that should not be seen anymore as adversaries. So what do you think about the validity of this claim? And would you say that this claim has been kind of equally embraced by heritage professionals and heritage consumers? Or perhaps there is a third way, I don't know, a more nuanced approach, rather than moving between either or. Clara?
Well, from the private sector, I would say that the idea of heritage and innovation is definitely growing. So for Herbé, obviously we have to meet a lot of people, consumers and professionals. And we see that mainly consumers, they really want to believe in heritage. A lot of people have a passion for heritage, which is obvious because it has our history, it has our identity. So they don't want heritage to they want it to be preserved, but the problem is that they don't really see how to do it. So there is a lack of knowledge. For example, when we meet an owner of a heritage building, he usually doesn't know where to go. So where does he have to go to make sure that his heritage building is preserved and gets a new use that respects the heritage values? He doesn't know. So what does he do? He goes to a traditional project developer, and obviously they don't have the know-how either. So that's usually the problem.
But would you say that, when you start working on a project and I think you analyze potential consumers' needs, but also let's say the owner of the site or the building, would the word innovation pop up immediately, or you would rather avoid it and keep it till later?
We would avoid it.
You would avoid it, okay.
Yes, that's
and
true.
Why?
Yeah, because people still associate, obviously when you are an owner of a building, you want to get as much revenue from it as you can. And the people that we meet, they don't associate heritage with innovation and with revenues. They associate new construction with revenues. So that's kind of the problem, and but we see that it is evolving. We also see that a lot of professionals are contacting us because they realize that they don't have the know-how to do it, so they are really looking for a solution. We are also experimenting with some crowdfunding projects because obviously not every heritage building is suited to find enough funding to make something new out of it without crowdfunding. So we are experimenting with it, and we have tried it with a few archaeological projects, and it was very successful, and now we hope to move on to really reuse projects of heritage buildings, and maybe I can let you know whether it was successful.
Thanks a lot. Gabor, what do you think? Adversaries or allies?
First, thank you so much for the invitation. Actually, I'm a historian, so I don't think they are either of the two. I think actually these are the two sides of the same coin. And let me explain why. As a historian, of course, it's not just, I'd like to actually link what Clara just said. There's a huge demand for heritage and innovation. These two words are omnipresent. If you look at the Horizon Europe work program, I mean, it's packed with these two words. As a historian, of course, you'll immediately ask why these two terms are so popular. If these two terms are so popular, there must be a social need for these two terms. And actually, they are replacing something else, or they represent something new. I think they are replacing two other words on which we use to construct our identity. Heritage is replacing history, and innovation is replacing development. If you think about the modern times, of course, in the 18th, 19th century, our identity was based on a break, a rupture. The past became a distant future. And actually, everything was based on development. And these both were very clear. So our development was a linear process, and our past was to be constructed according to meta-narrative, nation building, actually the story of the winners. Obviously now, the late 20th, early 21st century is not the case any longer. So now we are facing a new period, actually, and we need new terms to construct this new period and this identity. And actually, I suppose, of course, we have 3 minutes, so I can't go into details. The thing is, heritage is replacing history, meaning that anyone can construct its own identity. There are a multiplication of histories and pasts. And actually, and it has been studied, that's what we call the presentism. But the same happened to development. Of course, natural sciences and technologies, they don't talk about it, but we have multiplication of futures. Actually, the future is getting very scary with ecological change and climate change, etc. So innovation is different from that because innovation gives a big number of opportunities and varieties of the future. So these two things, heritage and innovation, determine the new kind of concept of time, which is continuous. It's not based on ruptures and breaks any longer. So we have a continuous link to the past and a continuous link to the future. And the second thing is they are very much accelerated. We could see in the morning when there was this crowdsourcing about knowledge, we can see how quickly knowledge is constructed and how less critical it becomes because of the acceleration of time. And the third very important characteristic of this time is it's stochastic. Stochastic, I don't know if you're familiar with the term, but it means that there's a multiplication of possibilities. Either for the past, it's not just one meta-narrative, there's the multiplicity of the past, and it can be created anytime. We are recreating our past many times, and actually there's a multiplicity of creating our futures. It's not just one meta-narrative of a linear development. There are so many stochastic ones, and actually when we are creating roadmaps of innovation, there are so many bifurcations, as you say in French, right? Bifurcations when you go to different times. So these two things determine a very new approach to time and to our concept, and probably the society is still digesting it. Because they still think in history and development, but actually it's heritage and innovation.
I think that's a really excellent point, and I mean it also shows you know how heritage has been sort of transformed. I mean the term itself and how it has been embraced by so many fields. I mean suddenly, you know, still a couple of years ago you still worked in the field of let's say history or literature or whatever, right? Now everyone works in the field of heritage, and again. I mean, the use of innovation that you mentioned, I mean, how attractive the word sounds instead of, well, change or development. I think that's a brilliant point. Hopefully we'll get back to this in a second. Maria Jimena, what do you think about this juxtaposition of heritage, innovation, adversaries, allies?
Thank you, Robert. We, of course, see them as allies, because this is what we are trying to show with the Innovation Handbook, but we are also aware that it's not a common association, and that is what we are trying to help with the handbook. I very much agree with what both Clara and Gabor said. For example, what Clara was mentioning, that people sometimes don't know how to actually implement the ideas. That is something that we saw a lot while we were mapping the cases. It's not that there are not ideas, like good ideas related to heritage, it's that people sometimes don't really know how to actually implement them. So they stay there like in a dream, in a nice, crazy idea, as Aziliz was saying, but it doesn't become an actual innovation. So I think that's why it's very important that companies as Herbé can help people to know what to do. And at the same time, on the other hand, there are the innovators who are not necessarily in the heritage field, but want to join it. And they are too scared of the regulations or of the things that they are too rigid and they cannot do anything creative with it. So I think the challenge is to find the balance between taking the risk, like getting outside of the box, but preserving the historical layers of heritage, because at the end, that should be the core. So we cannot do innovations that will sacrifice the valuable aspects of heritage, whether it is a monument or a tradition or a collection in a museum. It has to remain at the core, the preservation of this heritage, with knowing what things maybe you can, let's say, sacrifice a bit to let the innovation in. I think this balance is very challenging, but that's also what all the cases that we map have succeeded in doing this. So I think this could be one way, and we are trying with our handbook, of course, to encourage people. And
I was just wondering, the phrase that you used, that you need to sacrifice something for innovation, is this a kind of shared or common belief that you always need to sacrifice something to let innovation in?
I think probably yes, but it is important to know what to sacrifice. So if you have a really good understanding of the value of your heritage, you can make this decision responsibly, because of course the key values can never be sacrificed. But heritage needs to be preserved, and it needs to keep the velocity that the world is moving. So if some buildings, so I speak about building because I'm an architect, but of course any other kind of heritage, sometimes is the only way they can survive. I think this is the case maybe with some of the Herbé projects, that they are complex buildings that if you only restore them, but do not have a proper use, they won't survive. So sometimes, yeah, most of the time I will say you have to sacrifice something, but it's important to know what.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot. Gabor, let me get back to you and to your point, because of course you've been studying and observing and analyzing the development of heritage studies in the last couple of years. And going back to what you said about this major change and embrace of innovation and heritage, and you know the replacement of some former categories or former ideas with the new ones, would you say that there is some major innovation-oriented paradigm and heritage-oriented paradigm present in today's studies, in today's academia? And would you say that heritage needs, and heritage studies, that's perhaps even more important, do heritage studies need some further innovation?
Yeah, as I said before, it's hard to avoid any kind of innovation if you talk about heritage studies. Of course, heritage, it's evolving very quickly, and I suppose in the last 200 years, which has its history of heritage, heritage at least had two paradigm shifts. First, it was very much the agent of nation building up to the 1960s, and then UNESCO took it as an international paradigm. And actually, it was also imposing other countries, not Western countries, to reconstruct their identity according to this heritage. But that was put into question immediately after the very wording of the word heritage. And now we are in the third paradigm, that's my approach, that it's a very holistic approach to heritage. It's tangible, intangible, natural, and actually cultural heritage is very much replacing culture itself. As we could see in humanities and social sciences, there were the linguistic turn, the cultural turn, which were very crucial to ask for or redefinition of the foundation of these sciences, but at the same time they kind of cut these sciences from the society because the language became kind of very special on this. So I suppose heritage studies is a very expression of the fact that academia is going back to the society, and the society wants to take possession of this academia, especially humanities and social sciences, create a kind of personal turn. That means that the involvement of the social actors in the creation of their own identities with the multiplication, what we all know about this. So in that sense, of course, there's a huge interest in the past. Probably never had this. But this must be constructed, and it's not the affair of the academics any longer. And when I talk about history, it's not just history, it's also archaeology, it's anthropology, actually it's all humanities and social sciences. So however we construct our past, so all the professionals of this. I would say maybe just one sentence that the professionals are kind of reluctant to give this power to the others or share it with this. So of course we have excellent initiatives of participative models, but I wouldn't say that all academia is giving out, of course, or giving away its power. But I think it's good that there's a social demand for that, and if social demand wants to be practical. So I think heritage studies has a great potential actually to take over humanities in many sense, especially if we look at from the point of view of financing. I mean, both national and international European funds very much favor heritage. Heritage, which is like a reconsideration or redefinition of humanities and social sciences from the social needs. Of course, we have to define these needs, and I can also see a danger in this innovation and value-led redefinition of humanities and social sciences in the name of heritage, that is becoming less critical. I think we have to know that heritage is a double-edged sword. It's very good if in a society where it was an agent of democratization, as in Western Europe, in many cases in UK, France, US, it's an involvement of the society. But in other parts of the world, like Central and Eastern Europe, I know it quite well, it can be a very agent of populism and the political use of the past in the name of the society. So I think we have to be very careful about this, and we have to put this innovation into context. Context, that means the historical, social, and very much the critical approach is necessary for that. So I think, just to answer your question, yes, there is a paradigm shift, definitely. I think the very paradigm shift is the entering of heritage studies into academia. We can see that in, like 20 years ago, there were very, very few departments and programs. Now they are mushrooming all over the world. So as I said before, there must be a social demand for that. So it's expressing something new. And of course, it's led, it must be practical. Students want to study something practical, that's why they are here. But we have to also keep a critical approach to that, and we shouldn't forget that we can't use the same model without applying the proper context to the object what we are studying.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot. Well, I'm absolutely delighted because John has joined us. Hello, John.
Hello, I'm so sorry. I made the most elementary of mistakes, which was to join you at 10:30 UK time. What a silly thing to do. So many apologies.
Not at all. Well, we're delighted that you're with us. I've already introduced you, so I don't think that we need any further word of introduction. So let me move to my first question to you, which is concerned with the activities of the National Trust, which in fact has been a pioneer with regard to how heritage can adequately respond to social and political demands and social and political changes. One of the projects that I would like you to talk about is Prejudice and Pride, through which the Trust has explored LGBTQ history. And in fact, by this project, established what I think is a thoroughly innovative model for addressing queer heritage. What was the response? First of all, could you tell us briefly about the project itself? But what I'm particularly interested in is what was the response of various actors to this project, from visitors to heritage staff, and how did this project change the heritage landscape of the UK?
Thank you for your question. So Prejudice and the National Trust is an organisation that cares for some 500 heritage and natural sites in the United Kingdom. We're supported by about 5 million members who pay a fee to join the National Trust. Over a period of 3 or 4 years, we have run a series of what we call challenging histories. So looking at particular aspects of the histories of the places that we care for. So one of these, for example, looked at women's histories and a history of suffrage at National Trust places. And one of them, as you say, called Prejudice and Pride, looked at LGBTQ histories. You very kindly said that it was innovative. I don't think it was. I think it was a very ordinary program, but I think the response was to do with the nature of this organisation and of the way parts of the UK population think about heritage. So all we did with the programme was to explore the history, the queer histories of some of the places which had histories that were directly relevant. There is nothing, I think, exceptional in that. And as an organisation, we are determined to tell the total history, the whole history of the places that we care for. But the reaction actually was very strong. A significant reaction from parts of the media, a significant reaction from some of the National Trust members. This was 4 years ago. So I suppose my reflection is, as I say, that the programme itself was unexceptional. It's the sort of programme that I think many heritage and cultural organisations would run. But I think the clue is the fact that the National Trust has 5 million members. And if you look among 5 million people in any of our nations, you'll find a disparate range of views. All of those members feel a strong ownership and affiliation to the organisation. And so as soon as we explore histories that are complex in some sense, and therefore some could be contested, there's bound to be a reaction. So we're an organisation a bit like the National Health Service or the BBC in the UK, and when people think about the places that we care for, particularly the historic houses, 17th, 18th and 19th century houses, they have a very particular idea in their minds of what it means to be English, what it means to be British, and anything we do that appears to challenge that appears to challenge quite a narrow history of those places is problematic or challenging in some sense. So did it move the conversation on? I think it did. I think now, just 4 years later, I think that particular conversation is more normalized in the UK. In heritage circles, and actually is less contested. So I think definitely there has been some move forwards. I think in particular, there has been a sort of warm response from the National Trust's own staff as well. So I think it made a small difference in the sector more broadly, in the heritage sector. But I think when it comes to the many gay people, of course, who work for the National Trust, we have about 10,000 staff. So a proportion of those are queer, of course. It has made a much more significant difference in terms of how those people feel about their heritage being reflected in the national heritage.
But you do continue to challenge what you refer to as the narrow vision of history. More recently, with your investigation of the links or relationship between colonialism, slavery, and mostly historic houses and heritage, of course, which is so very important and which gained some extra context given the Black Lives Matter movement. We started this this session, not this session, but the morning session, with a quick survey or kind of poll where we asked about the area or the field where innovation is least likely to occur, and it turned out that heritage-led political innovation, I think it got 0 votes. So basically, there seems to be a belief that heritage-led political innovation doesn't really occur. It's not likely to occur. But your report, the report that was published in September 2020 on slavery and colonialism and heritage, caused a major political stir in the UK and a series of debates. So, given the overall response to this report, would you say that heritage institutions, heritage bodies, heritage practices may lead to some kind of political change, may transform various political agendas?
Yeah, so you're right. We did cause a stir. So the stir was more than 300 press articles, 3 debates in our parliament about the National Trust and whether we were doing the right thing. And actually, something called the Charity Commission, that is responsible for all charities in the UK, also was asked to look at the work of the National Trust and consider whether it was appropriate or not. Again, I would put all of this in the first context that I mentioned. If you think that the National Trust cares for 220 mansion houses, historic houses, stately homes, representations of wealth in the United Kingdom landscape, and therefore represents a very particular impression of what it means to be English or to be British. And so again, this subject, I think, was seen as controversial. The report was only a summary of the bare historical facts of the history of about 100 of the places that we care for. So in a sense, it shouldn't have been controversial. But the context is, unusually this year, England did very well in the European Championships and got to the final, of course, and when we were knocked out on penalties in the final. The 3 young men who missed penalties were all black. I mean, as a response to that, there was a significant amount of racism that was evident on social media and so on, and fortunately, a big pushback against that, a big challenge against that nationally, and everybody agreeing that, of course, that was a terrible thing. But that's the context that report was published into. So are we leading to change? I think the challenge is that the government in the UK, it has many good things about it, but at the moment, as in some other countries, the government has decided that culture is fair territory for debates, and is actually using culture, I think you could argue, to polarize opinion. And so I'm not convinced at the moment that we are seeing positive political change coming out of this. Actually, the other parties in the United Kingdom are not joining in this debate. They're not playing the role of the opposition in opposing. So there is a sort of strong debate that is playing out in the media and in the press, but actually relatively little pushback against that debate, and particularly because many, as across Europe, many cultural institutions in this country are funded by the government, nationally or locally, and there is a challenge. So many of those organisations are keeping quiet, to be honest. So we found ourselves a little bit isolated in this conversation. I suppose the other thing I would say is what are we doing about it? I'm not that interested in political debate. Perhaps I should be, but what I'm interested in is the places that we care for, the collections that we care for, and telling the whole history of the places that we care for. That's my job, and not more than that. So what we're doing, we're not interested in being a champion. We're not interested in gesture politics. What we are interested in is developing the presentation, the interpretation, the research of the places that we care for, and that we're going to get on with. So we plan to develop new interpretation for about 40 National Trust houses, and we will tell the total history of those houses, from architecture and stories of wealth to more challenging stories and more contested stories. So I think that is our best response. I think not so much to think about the politics, although we can't avoid it, but actually just to get on with evolving our places with new interpretation, with new presentation all the time.
John has mentioned a number of initiatives, and you've been involved in one initiative that is also partly political, right? Namely, the European Heritage Label. One of the innovative things about this type of award is that it moves away from the idea of tangible heritage and talks about intangible value and talks about symbolic value. Could you briefly talk about this this award? And I've been wondering, is there any space for innovation in heritage listings? We've had so many listings over the last several decades. So is there any potential for innovation?
Yeah, thank you so much. I wonder how many of you know about the European Heritage Label. I mean, that's the big problem of the EU, I think. Actually, it's celebrating its 10th anniversary. The decision at the Parliament was made 10 years ago, and actually the listing started 8 years ago. So at the moment we have 48 sites. Actually, Poland is the most representative country with 6 sites, so it's very impressive. Actually, except for 2 countries, all the members of the EU signed it and putting on sites. And every 2 years there's a panel I'm chairing at the moment, which is selecting the sites. And as you said rightly, it's a typical third regime heritage listing. It's not tangible, it's not intangible. They use the term site, so there are sites, but anything can be a site. It can be a monument, it can be a poem, it can be an action related to intangible heritage, it can be natural. So actually it all comes from, as you said, it's very much political. It's after the memorandum in France in 2005 and Denmark, and it's all about the EU's worrying about its own identity and how to represent culture and not competing with national agendas. And I think it's a very honest initiative. At the same time, it's innovative in a way that it's leaving this tangible, intangible, very traditional Western approach to the past and it's very much community-based. And actually, it must be a lively community behind any application, and it's based on a project. So it's not just a site as it is and its preservation, but the project, which can be also criticized from the approach of authorized heritage discourse, and it happened actually saying that this is European propaganda. I disagree with that, because as the member of the panel, we could see how harsh debates we have, and actually the panel members change all the time, and we have, equality from disciplines, from different sectors of heritage and gender, etc. So we can see how difficult difficult it is and how challenging it is to create identity through heritage right now. At the moment, as I said, we have 48. Probably by the end of this decade, we'll have some 100 sites. Hopefully, it will be better known by that time. And actually, it's a real mobilization of European population to express itself. So any minorities are most welcome to put themselves on the map of European identity. So I think it's, as you said, it can be very innovative, and it's very innovative because, as I said before, there must be a project. And the other thing is it must be appealing for young people. So that's one of the musts. So how to, and of course also synergy is another important thing. It must link to other European projects in education, in culture, in economic development, regional development, etc. So I think this is a good example how these sites can represent themselves, and sometimes they are very small ones. I mean, one of the Polish sites is a cemetery, a World War I cemetery in the eastern part. Probably nobody should or would have heard about this, but since it's on a higher level of representation, and it's in a network now, and it's the other thing is that these sites are expected to build a network. So these are all the elements what we dream about when we put together heritage and innovations. These sites are expected to do that. At the moment, the problem is there's not much money behind it. But apparently the new work program, there will be more. So hopefully these sites will be able to represent themselves more efficiently. But personally, I really adore these sites because there are communities who have pride of themselves and who took the initiative to represent themselves on a national, because there's a pre-selection national level, then on the European level. So
I guess, Gabor, you're looking forward to some interesting submissions in the upcoming years.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I'm really glad because this year, this is just, sorry, there's the advertisement. We have the first submissions from Finland, Bulgaria, and Slovakia. So it's spreading.
That's excellent. Clara, I mean, when it comes to your activity, it's impossible not to talk about Herbé, namely the research agency that you co-founded. Could you tell us about the agency itself, its objectives, its activities? And of course, the question that in a way you partly responded earlier on, but I would like to investigate it further, about the way you approach innovation in your projects, and how important innovation is to you as project managers, but also to the consumers and owners of the buildings, because you mostly work in the field of tangible heritage.
Yes, that's true. We mostly work with buildings, obviously. So one of the key foundations of Herbé is that we are a very interdisciplinary team. So we are 5 founders, and so we have heritage experts, but also architects, interior architects, urban planners, and restoration experts who really work in the field. So those people, those experts are not subcontractors, but they really are part of the group of the founders. So when we start a project, we start with a very broad approach. So we always have a helicopter view on a project. It makes us completely different from other project developers, because obviously we focus on heritage values, but also we are very interdisciplinary, and we look at the project from completely different angles than a traditional developer. Also, because we work with so many different experts, we learn from each other, obviously. So, for example, very extensive historical research is one of the fundamentals of Herbé. And what we are doing now is, so we do our very elaborate historical research, and we implement it in our architectural BIM software. So it means that if in 10 years there would be a problem with the building, we not only have the normal data that would be in BIM, but we also have all the historical restoration data which is digitalized, which is a really important factor for us. Another main thing for Herbé, obviously, is that our main goal is heritage preservation. So we don't use a heritage site to create something else, which is very often what traditional project developers do. They buy a heritage site to demolish a part and then to construct new buildings. We do not want to do it, and we don't want people to associate us with those things. So we really want to create a very clear identity as Herbé. We have set up a series of like a project plan to do it. So the first thing that we do is we always delve into the past. So it's the extensive historical research, obviously, that we do as heritage and restoration experts. This is our basis. And then while we create our master plan, we often construct a transitional phase on the site. Because when we buy a site, obviously it costs a lot of money, and we need revenues while we make up the master plan. So what we do is we create a temporary reuse of the site to get some revenues while we get to know the site, and while we also experience how the people who live, the communities surrounding the site, what they want to see happening to the site itself. So, for example, we have an old rectory from the 18th century in Belgium right now that we bought. And right now we made it into a pop-up restaurant just to see how the communities surrounding it respond and how it is received. So that's very important for us. It gives us time to create a really good plan. And then another big thing for us is actually that we believe that the next big thing in innovation and heritage is not per se a spectacular, innovative idea, but it can be a series of small ideas and small events. For example, we had an old house, a really beautiful heritage site, and the owners came to us because they had some offerings from project developers who wanted to demolish it and create new construction. And they said to us, yeah, what can you do with it? Because actually we love the house, we love its heritage values, but we obviously want to get the money we would also expect from the project developers. And actually the solution was very simple. There was a school next to the house, and in the end we were able, after a lot of negotiating, to make the house into the office for the director of the school. So actually a very simple solution, but it was also innovative in heritage.
Because one thing that I find really fascinating is the profile of your commissioners, right? People that approach you because they need to, most probably they are approached by, traditional developers, right? That want to basically pay a lot of money and transform the buildings. And it requires a lot of effort to get in touch with you and to think about a new way or a new life for the building. One project that features in the ILUCIDARE Handbook is Paterskerk. And if I'm correct, you were approached by the owner of this place who had some idea about using this building for some social purposes rather than transforming it exclusively for his or her own benefit or interest.
Yes, that's true. It's a very interesting project because we insert a mixed function in it. So it will be social living and residential living. Obviously, that's quite a puzzle because it's difficult to get the same amount of economical revenues from social living, obviously. And actually, here the owner of the building was a non-profit organization. And again, they had received a lot of offerings from project developers because it's a beautiful site. It's an old church and a convent in the city center. So it's very wanted. But actually, to be honest, Herbé often plays on the emotion that people link with heritage. So that's really a focus point of us. People don't want heritage to be demolished, and that was really our strength here. Obviously, we also had to create a really strong content to persuade the non-profit organization of what we could do and of our master plan. But in the end, after a lot of negotiating, it did work. And I think part of our success is really the elaborate historical research and really knowing our buildings so well. And because we know our buildings so well, we are able to persuade the owners that our idea of heritage preservation is the good one. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, obviously it's really a puzzle, and we have to have a lot of patience. So these projects really take time. It's something that we, in the beginning, may have underestimated, but it's worth it. So.
And perhaps my final question to you, Clara. What about the attitude of the developers to Herbé and to organizations of this kind? Do they consider you a major competition, or they want to learn from what you've been doing, perhaps accommodate some of the solutions that you've been proposing?
Well, actually it's remarkable, but we get most of our leads we get from the project developers, because they don't have the know-how to deal with the projects, and they got to know us. They contact us first. Obviously, two of the founders of Herbé work in Loránd, which is a heritage business in Bruges, and we've been around for 20 years, so we are kind of a brand already in the region. So the project developers, they do know us already, and we have an established reputation when it comes to heritage, which obviously helps. But it's amazing that they want to work with us, because they also, I think they are realizing that they can't just ignore the heritage values of those sites.
Thank you very much. Maria Jimena, you've been developing the handbook alongside Aziliz for, well, quite some time now. And I've been wondering about individuals or projects that you've been studying in detail, and ones that have excelled in heritage-led innovation. Was there any specific activity that you've identified as uniquely groundbreaking, or perhaps was there any kind of conclusion that you arrived at, the kind of conclusion that you didn't expect to arrive at when you started working on the handbook?
Thank you, Robert. First, I think I also consider myself a young professional in heritage, so a bit more general for me to see the variety of projects that we found related to heritage. All the things that you can do with heritage was already very impressive, because I had this idea maybe of also more traditional projects, and then coming to see all of these projects with different scales, actors involved, so many bright ideas was already great. But I think if I will have to say that something that was maybe more surprising was where the projects where different sectors are involved. For example, there are some things that are more usually related to heritage or usually related to innovation, as we saw already in the poll before, maybe technological or social. And then when we found these projects that were associated to completely different things, for example, the ecological, having the conservation of traditional farm buildings, because you want to preserve the habitat of bat species that live in the roof of these buildings, then you understand the potential that intersecting sectors have. So that was very, very surprising in a way. Or for example, starting a project in conservation of castle ruins, because you need to give employment opportunities to unemployed people and being able to train them, and at the same time solve this problem of these ruins that are very much in need of conservation. So I think when different sectors are intersected is very interesting. That can also answer the second part of the question, like findings that maybe we were not expecting, and I think that has to do a lot with the context in which heritage is located. It cannot be only the heritage. It has to respond to the social and economical aspect that surround it and the community around it. So I think that was very good. And if I might add something a bit less scientific, but also quite impressive, was the enthusiasm that we found when, with all the people that we were collaborating with the handbook, that you saw already in the authors that Aziliz was showing, our amazing co-creators, because they were all very happy to be part of this, and that heritage-led innovation is becoming something more and more important. And some of them were even surprised. Sometimes we can say like, oh yes, we are innovative. We are doing something innovative, and I think that's a step in the right direction.
Thanks a lot. We should be wrapping up soon, so let me just ask a final question to all of you, but I would like to invite our students to contribute both to answering this, this question, and of course you may add questions of your own. Of course, we've been all kind of exposed to all sorts of debates about post-pandemic world. I'm not quite sure about, the word post-pandemic is the right one. It's rather, I don't know, pre-post-pandemic, post-pre-pandemic, inter-pandemic, I don't really know. But in all those debates, the word innovation keeps popping up. And I've been wondering, and this is the question that I want to pose, what kind of innovation does heritage need in this post-pre-pandemic world? And what kind of innovation is heritage able to generate? Would anybody like to answer this question first? Clara?
Yeah, I mostly see it that heritage can play a big part in helping to put the idea of circular economy more into practice, even more into practice. Not only on a level of materials, but also buildings and spaces, because heritage obviously can teach us how to activate the buildings that we have instead of building new ones, which is obviously beneficial for our environment and people.
Thank you. Gabor?
Yeah, I'd like to join very much what Clara said. I think there's a rediscovery of local heritage, because travel is getting dangerous for these different reasons, and it has a bad impact on the environment. So I suppose what is happening right now, that this false distinction between global and local, very much used by politicians, should be forgotten, and we should just appreciate our local heritage and discover every aspect of this, because heritage is, as we just said, it's very complex. So probably an innovation will come in. As soon as people discover their own heritage, there's a huge demand for the past, there's a huge demand for constructing identity, so it's just we have to channel right the heritage sites, possibilities locally and from a global perspective.
Thank you. John?
Three things very quickly. The first, I think we've seen very clearly over the last year or two that more clearly than ever before, that unless heritage changes, it dies. So heritage needs to continue to evolve. And you've taught, some of the speakers have spoken beautifully about new purposes for places, new design, new creative responses. And of course, I've spoken about new interpretation. So I think just that consciousness as a sector that we have to, our thinking has to continue to evolve. The other thing, something else, I think, bring together the natural and the cultural worlds, and that's something we've very much seen in the pandemic, with new uses of countryside, but also new creative responses. And I think thinking in some other countries is more advanced on that than it is in the UK. So I think we need to bring our natural and cultural worlds much more closely together. And the other thing that I would highlight is, and I would say this because the National Trust in the UK has received a lot of challenge over the last year. And I think in terms of innovation, what is going to be most important is how we move forward, not what we do, but how we move forward. And I think we need to move forward with open hands and with open hearts. So where we are criticized, I think we need not, I think we shouldn't be criticizing other people. I think we should be very open-hearted in how we respond. And I think heritage probably has a particular role in society if we're able to do that. I would love to do a little project. I would love to bring together people who disagree around the historic tables in some of our houses, some of our properties, and we have hundreds of them. And some of your properties will have other historic tables. I love the idea of bringing people who have very different views on culture and society today, as well as heritage in the past, around some of those historic tables for interesting conversations. So if any European partner would like to work with me on that, I would be very pleased to hear from you.
Thank you very much. And the final word should go to Aziliz.
Thank you very much, Robert. And thank you very much also for all the panelists. I've definitely been enjoying the talks and the discussion. I heard a lot of interesting points that both match the handbook that's coming out soon, as well as thoughts to co-develop possibly in the future. Because again, this handbook is going to be the first, let's say, definition or Kickstarter for the debate on heritage and innovation. Yes, Robert, I'll be very quick. So I heard several points that I definitely agree with. Maybe one thing to add from my side. Okay, so innovation is all around, be it in EU-funded projects, whatnot, and everything goes so fast. When looking into scientific research on innovation, there is a lot of radical avalanche innovations, as we call them, out there. I think the device for the heritage sector should be evolution over revolution. I think if the heritage sector tries to become an R&D sector overnight, be it in material products or let's say assimilating existing technologies, it's just not going to work. Let's try to keep the heritage values at the very core of what we do, but we should be brave and open to innovation. That being said, we did find a lot of cool and crazy ideas out there. And every time that we found them, it's mainly about, I think we should be open and ready to talk to the people that we look at with very critical eyes. So we should look more into what small entrepreneurs are doing, or like small startup companies, even though they're like completely unrelated to what we think heritage is or what we're doing. Just talk to them, have a look at them, and then that's gonna be how we are gonna keep being relevant and find new ways to work, because we just cannot keep being this conservative sector only drawing on public resources. We really have to be out there and be innovative in ourselves. I guess that's what's it about.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to everyone. I mean, to all of you for your contribution. It was an excellent debate. I think I can allow for 3 questions from the floor. We do have some time. We have a long lunch break, so I'll be more than happy to give the mic to the floor and get some questions to our panelists.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the interesting discussion and the contributions by our panelists. More than a question is a comment in relation to what you were talking of the role of the heritage world in the post-pandemic future. So I very much agree with the panelists on the fact that cultural heritage can play a key role in sustainability, in the fight also against climate change. But maybe an interesting entry point for innovation, I think, at a time when public budgets are shrinking and there are many competing sectors and investments. I think the cultural heritage world needs to stay relevant and also sort of explore more the contribution that the sector can make to health and well-being, which is, it's a field that is very much being researched right now, in particular in the UK, how cultural heritage can contribute to individual and community well-being, mental health, how can we mobilize this sector also in the health, to contribute to the health problem. So I think it's interesting to also think in this direction. And as Jimena said, the most surprising innovations come when the sectors are intersecting. So I would say, yeah, health and well-being are definitely an important space to explore.
Thank you very much. I was not precise enough. I mean, comments are also very welcome. It's not just questions. We're not looking for questions only.
Well, I do have a comment and then I do have a question, but my comment is very, very brief. I face innovation like a subject of trial and error. Back in the 70s, the use of plastic was an innovative material. Now we find out it doesn't work, we go back to paper and wood. So I think it will always be like this. And my question is to Clara. It's wonderful to reuse the old buildings, but how sustainable it is for the needs that we do have in the present and the future? I mean, for how much longer can we reuse a 500 years old building?
At Herbé, we see it as an infinite evolution. Like we can keep reusing those buildings. If we restore them in a proper way, we can, with the good techniques and good expertise, it's indefinite. Obviously, yeah, the heritage buildings where we are at the moment focusing on are built like, how can I say, like they don't build the buildings anymore today. So if we keep on reusing them and we put a proper use in them, I think this can be a really long-term story.
Because it's an issue how much you can keep the authenticity and the integrity of a heritage site. If we keep reconstructing and reconstructing and reconstructing and redevelop it, and how functional it is for the future. So all buildings, for example, they do have, they cannot support the heating system that we need nowadays, or the air conditioning system that we need for today, that we do have heat waves and stuff. So how functional it is, and is it a bottom line that we can say, okay, now it has to be demolished, we cannot reuse it?
Yeah, well, the thing is that obviously we only, when we see a site and we are of the opinion that it has to be demolished because it's just too far gone, we will have to be honest and just say, yes, this will cost too much money to keep up with modern standards and it will have to be demolished. We have had these examples, but the good thing is that we can see this pretty soon in our process, which is really good. But we do really ensure those modern standards, obviously, because we also put residential living in our sites, so we can't afford to put anything less in there. But that's where our interdisciplinary team of restoration experts and architects really come out very handy, because our restoration experts, they know how to restore a building or how to give it a new heating system while remaining the heritage values, because they have the field expertise, while our architects, obviously, they can tell them what is needed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think Aziliz wants to answer this question as well.
Yeah, or, well, Clara answered it perfectly, but just make a small addition. Again, I think it's what has been mentioned before. It's about, yeah, the balance between keeping what's there in terms of the heritage values, but in this specific case, there is so much, if you're interested in this topic, so much research and literature done on the amount of embodied energy that is present in buildings, and how harmful it would be for the environment for actually demolishing it and building a new one. That's usually more harmful for the environment than not. It's a method called life cycle costing analysis. So there is indeed a large body of literature on this, but I think from our point of view, our task is to, yeah, just as Clara said, always try to see what's possible. The building should be livable, obviously, otherwise it doesn't have any sense as well if the building doesn't have a function. And then maybe I also wanted to, this is kind of related to the comment made by Lorena. I agree there's a lot of things that we can connect heritage to, and we should. It creates windows of opportunities for us, as we explain it in the handbook, but let's also try to keep real. And I mean, we are in the heritage sector, we are not curing cancer. I mean, in the end, we do what we can, we try to be innovative, but let's also keep it real in a way. I think that's a good thing to keep in mind.
And we do have time for one more question.
Thank you very much for all the insights that you provided. It's like more a hybrid comment question, what I would like to say. So we're seeing all these like impact assessment studies and all these approaches in which we demonstrate basically the role of cultural heritage in society. We've seen the Cultural Heritage Council of Europe, we've seen the Herbé project. So, I'm sorry, I don't know what was that. But a lot of times I think that this engagement with heritage and the access to heritage is a privilege. And I'm really curious how you would see, and I think that in a post-pandemic world, we should try to focus to bring heritage to all people, because in a lot of places where people just don't have their basic needs met, they can't think higher up the pyramid. And although it has been proven so many times how heritage can help, but there's a gap in reaching there. And I'm curious how you would see this tackled.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great question.
I'm not sure if I made myself completely clear.
John?
I think you made yourself very clear, and it would be a good topic for another conference. Perhaps it is the next conference that is coming up, because it's a big subject. I think I would just emphasize that the challenge is that we need to continue to change. So if we are not relevant, then we need to find new relevances, new functions, new histories, new stories, new creative approaches. So I think often our sectors feel that we need to change how people perceive us, but it's not about changing the rest of the world, it's changing ourselves, it's changing our own approach, and that is what this conference is about. It's all about innovation. So I find it very heartening to hear partners from across Europe talking about how innovation applies to heritage, because I think it is only that will keep heritage alive and make it relevant.
Gabor?
Yeah, I think it's a very relevant question. I'd just like to give you one example, the Roma. That's the biggest minority in Europe, and we have one of the biggest ethnically, and they really have a problem of representation. And we have a project, actually EU project, about the Roma heritage. And it was very interesting to see, at least in Hungary, how the Roma tried to institutionalize their identity following the good old nation-building model, having a parliament and cultural institutions, tried to get into academia, and it didn't work. But now, thanks to the heritage, this is a more flexible and a less costly way to express yourself. I think they are now find little institutions which still have recognition through the heritage discourse. And I think we must encourage those initiatives, and we must, as you said, give the society, I mean all parts of the society who wish to express themselves, that the heritage discourse allows you with a limited way to express yourself and has a recognition in different levels. And I think the EU, for example, has a primary importance in that the heritage shouldn't be a privilege. It should be, we should use it as a flexible and a new way to institutionalize identity for those who were deprived of it. And it's happening with the Romas at least, and I hope it will work much better than it worked with the traditional ways of expressing themselves in the 90s or the 2000s.
And indeed, we will have a speaker tomorrow from European Roma Institute for Arts and Culture, So I guess this perspective will also be represented.
Yes, if
I
I
make
may.
a very small addition. Oh, sorry, Jimena.
No, Aziliz, go on.
Yeah, thank you. Because I really love the question. I was like, yes, and I agree with John, this is something for the next conference. So as I said in the beginning, we have two pillars in the project. We also work a lot on how can heritage contribute to better relations between EU and third countries, to collaborations on heritage, so international relations. In the project, we are conducting a lot of trainings, capacity buildings in South America, Sub-Saharan Africa, Middle East, variety of countries. And indeed, it's all the time the debates, well, it's not a debate, it's a knowledge exchange with local communities about why would I want to restore my small adobe house in the highlands of some Southern American country, while my neighbor is building a new fancy concrete building next door. So this is something that is also relevant on that scale. And it's always about explaining again how local materials are more durable, sustainable in certain climatic zones or regions, and also going with local communities who have lost touch with traditions. At the end, they usually see through this process of knowledge exchange relations that what they're doing is actually super valuable, but it's just because in their moment frame of time, it's no longer clear that what they are doing is just as valuable as the innovative components, let's say. So sometimes it's just heritage in itself has so much knowledge to be innovative, but we just touched with it in a way. So it's not always the new concrete buildings who are the best solution. But I really love that comment, and I agree we should have a next conference on this. So Robert, start taking your agenda. We're doing this.
Duly noted.
I would like to add very shortly, because it is indeed a very interesting question. I think the pandemic made everybody work on the accessibility to heritage. So for example, there are a lot of museums who receive visitors all year long. They don't have an issue in getting people to go in to visit them. And then they were closed, and they needed to think of how to be reachable by other people, whether it's an online tour or putting some of the collections available. And then they realized this is something that should remain, because not everybody has the chance to travel to visit a lot of heritage sites, and they should be able to see them. So of course, visitors will come back. They are already coming back. But then there is an added layer of another kind of audience that is not always the obvious one, and it is indeed related to privilege. So I think the pandemic helped in this, and probably we will see this remain.
Thank you. I'm sure our on-site speakers will be happy to talk to you during the lunch break. But so let me just thank you once again. Please do join me in expressing our thanks to the panelists. Thank you to John. Thank you to Aziliz for joining us online. It was a pleasure. Gabor, Clara, Maria, Jimena, it was a delight.